Hey everyone! Welcome to the Psychedelic Integration Podcast with Mystical Heart Collective. I'm Sinclair,
And I'm John.
and we help people heal with psychedelics through preparation, navigation, and integration. We're super excited today to share our very first episode where we have a special guest speaker, and we are having a conversation today with Carlos Tanner, the founder and director of the Ayahuasca Foundation in Peru. Carlos is so cool. We really enjoyed getting to know him a little bit. We liked it so much that we accidentally deleted the first recording that we did with him, so we did it twice. So this is the second version, which actually I think is much better. Carlos is just a really cool guy. He has a lot of experience and knowledge working with ancestral tradition in Peru, and he is really a psychedelic visionary, and it was really a pleasure to get to learn more about him and what is going on at Ayahuasca Foundation.
Yeah, so we talked a bunch about his journey into plant medicines, specifically ayahuasca. We talked about addiction and recovery with the help of the grandmother. And we talked about the importance of ritual, tradition, and ceremony when taking these medicines. So we have an awesome episode laid out ahead of you, so we hope you enjoy it. Yeah, why don't you start off by telling us like how you came to ayahuasca?
How I came to ayahuasca. That's a long story, I guess, or it could be. I'll save it for. I read Michael Harner's book, The Way of the Shaman, and the first chapter of that book, he describes how he came into shamanism, which was through ayahuasca. And I read that in my freshman year of college, so that kind of put ayahuasca on the map for me. I studied philosophy at the University of Massachusetts when I was at college, and I took a class called Philosophy of Religion, where I got to learn more about shamanism. And then I ended up getting a job that provided me a lot of internet access and not a lot to do with it. And I created my own research project to like pass the time, which was to study plant medicine and do my own like research. That was in 1999. And so ayahuasca became like a subject for me to study. And that led me to read pretty much everything I could get my hands on at the time. And the receptionist at that office was Peruvian. And so she invited me to go with her to Peru in January of 2000, which I did. And then I got to like talk to people who had drank ayahuasca, even though I didn't do it at that time. And that really like solidified my interest in it. So that when I got back to the US, I ended up drinking with someone who claimed to be from the Santo Daime Church. I kind of hope he wasn't, but I did drink ayahuasca in Massachusetts in like 2001, I want to say. But I found my way back to the Amazon in 2003 to drink ayahuasca for real in the Amazon with a curandero named Don Juan.
So, like both of us, I know that you have a history of overcoming an addiction. And how did that addiction and kind of play into your work with plant medicines? How did that all work together?
Right. Well, I guess I started using marijuana as an unconscious way to treat my childhood trauma or depression, which was the result of childhood trauma. And I definitely would not have phrased it that way at the time when I was a teenager. It just made me feel better. But I would say my first addiction was really to marijuana. And because it was a plant, that probably did like play into me becoming interested in plant medicines or other plants that did stuff to you. And I was very against like what I would call hard drugs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I gave psychedelics a pass. Like I did use LSD, but mostly it was like mushrooms and weed that were my go-tos. And then as I got older, I guess I found that, well, one, marijuana really wasn't like um, helping to cure any of my problems. It was just kind of like allowing me to tolerate them, but it was really kind of making my addiction to marijuana worse, because I got to the point where I was not sober ever, you know, like, and so once that became my baseline and I still felt depressed and still like felt troubled, then I guess that's probably what led me to try harder drugs. And that led me to like OxyContin and heroin and, you know, some of the opiates that are very, very good at like masking and covering up your issues, because you don't feel them at all.
Yeah.
But that certainly like started a downward spiral in my life very quickly. Like I was managing, you know, I was like successful as a weed head, like a pothead. I could smoke, you know, 12 bong hits a day and still like do my work and have a successful career and, you know, and keep my life like seemingly on track. But it was opiates that definitely like derailed that and started spiraling to the point where I woke up in my car underwater because I had blacked out behind the wheel coming home from a bar where I had been drinking and doing clonazepam. And that was my wake up call. And so that was really like the huge motivation to get myself down to the Amazon, and ayahuasca having already been on my radar as my kind of number one interest became what I took to be the path to salvation, which it was.
Uh-huh. Yeah, what a blessing the quick downward spiral of opiates really is. It's like brings you right to the, well, it brought me right to the point of, okay, I can no longer deny I need some help. So happy that this unfortunate thing crossed our paths. So as you went down to work with ayahuasca and are bringing this addiction, and as you were talking about like the depression and the childhood trauma kind of all wrapped up into that, like what did the healing process with ayahuasca look like?
Well, first of all, childhood trauma was not a term that I used ever, you know. It wasn't until I actually drank ayahuasca that I recognized childhood trauma in my life. You know, like I didn't know why I had the problems that I did. You know, I didn't know why I was depressed. I just knew that I was. And I honestly, I don't even know if I had like tried to figure it out that way, to like trace it, because that's not really our like medical paradigm. You know, it's not really like, let's figure out why you have depression. It's really just, what are we going to do to treat it?
Right.
You know, that's like the classic scenario in the Western world or in modern medicine. It's not like, why do you have it? It's just, let's just make it go away.
Right. There's a symptom, plug it up.
Yeah. Right. And so it wasn't really until I drank ayahuasca. But having said that, like I fully brought my addiction with me to Peru. So I was taking Valium like every day before I got to Iquitos. I might have taken it the day that I drank ayahuasca. I don't remember, but certainly the day before. And I was smoking weed. And, you know, it's kind of amazing with weed, especially like you can get weed anywhere in the world. You know, like there's a culture of weed that is amazing. So it was very quick for me to just get weed as soon as I arrived. Within like an hour of being in Peru, I think I was smoking a joint. And so that was not a great idea. I don't recommend people take drugs leading up to a ceremony. My first ceremony was, oh man, that was a tough ceremony. Physically, it was just brutal, like just horrible. Having a first ayahuasca experience in general is usually a pretty challenging time, but coming into it like full on pollution, like toxified body and system, it was way worse. But I had some unbelievable synchronicities, you know, of course, along the entire path, there were these incredible connections. And one of them was very important, was to be in ceremony with the chief of the Achuari tribe, which I didn't even realize was not like normal. It's incredibly rare to just happen to walk into a ceremony and have an indigenous chief in that ceremony with you. His presence like was very, very helpful in me recognizing that my experience was much more related to me than it was related to ayahuasca. And that instantly like gave me this great perspective going into the next ceremony. Well, it would help me just to decide to go into the next ceremony, because my first ceremony was so horrendous that I questioned whether or not I would ever do it again. Yeah. But his presence being so solid and so like seemingly non-affected by what was literally like destroying me, made me like recognize obviously that it was more me and not ayahuasca. And so then that took me like into looking at me, and then very quickly that was like a great way to understand my fear and then begin to like unravel what were ultimately the causes for my condition, which was going into my past and remembering repressed memories, most specifically of specific traumas that are traumatic experiences that had deeply affected the way that I defined myself and the truths that I had regarding myself and my place in my family and thus in the world, and how those inaccurate truths had infected all of my relationships, most especially with my parents and my friends and my community and every relationship that I'd had. And that was something that I had recognized. You know, like I didn't recognize the trauma or the cause, but I recognized that my relationships sucked, you know, and I didn't know why. So, you know, all these pieces like kind of came together. And the drug addiction, especially, there was a point where I like encountered this pterodactyl, this like shiny dinosaur creature that was attached to me, that I destroyed, that I like killed, that I defeated, you know, that I turned into dust. And I knew that was, in fact, I said like, you were driving the car. Like as soon as I saw it, I knew that it was this like demon that I associated with the addiction, that the addiction was this like conscious being attached to me, and that in my defeating it, I would be free from that, which, you know, I can't say like how it all works. Did I defeat a demon that was attached to me, or did my experience lend itself to having total confidence and changing my reality or my perception of reality to such that I knew I wouldn't be addicted? I'm not sure. I don't even care, to be honest. But yeah, that was the experience, and that was my interpretation of it, was that I had just defeated my addiction, and then I never was addicted again.
Wow.
I actually have a similar story about I had a bad alcohol addiction, and I had the same kind of connection to like an entity. I named him Carl because I don't like that name very much. And I was like, I don't know, it's Carl. But I ended up having this really powerful releasing experience at Burning Man and burning him in a fire, and have not had a drink since. And that was like over 3 years ago. So we've definitely heard people having that same kind of experience where the addiction feels like some kind of energetic being that is driving your behaviors. And I think the experience with plant medicine really can help you to identify and see that, and have whatever experience you need to have to overcome it, whether that's what does it, or whether you just believe that that's what happened. I don't think it matters so much.
So as you came down to Peru, you had this like series of ceremonies that are like really like doing these major shifts and paradigm changes internally. And your initial experience is really talking about a lot of this like personal healing. How do you go from like seeking ayahuasca for personal healing to opening up the Ayahuasca Foundation and working in service to others seeking the same thing?
Right. Well, my third ceremony, my first ceremony was horrendous, but it was very, very powerful. I definitely was having a full-on ayahuasca experience. I was just terrified of the experience. And that was a key to learning about how fear affects my perceptions and interpretations, which is something that we all know. We all know that if you're afraid of a sound at night, then your interpretation of it can send you into a panic attack. And if you're not afraid of a sound at night, then your interpretation of it might just have you get out of bed and check what the sound is. The second ceremony was very important for me because I encountered my first like true spirit, I guess, which was the spirit of someone that I had grown up with. And he put his hand on my shoulder and I felt it. And so I had tactile confirmation that what I was seeing, collaborated with what I was feeling. And then someone else in the ceremony called out to me to let me know that they were seeing him as well. And so then I had like second party confirmation. So I was like, at that point, it's kind of like, this is real. And so coming into the third ceremony, I knew that I wouldn't be afraid. I knew that spirits were real. And then it was really the third ceremony that I achieved my deepest healing, I guess you could say. And in that same ceremony, the curandero Don Juan Tangoa told me it was my path to be a healer, and he invited me to be his student. And during that time, I got like incredible confirmation that this was the truth. I saw this to be my destiny as well, or my path, and made a decision, at least within my own mind, without having confirmed it to anyone outside of me, that I would do that. And so when I came down to live 6 months later in January of 2004, to live with my teacher, or who would now be my teacher, Don Juan, I had an idea. I had a vision. My vision was that I was going to study until I became a shaman, and then I would go back home and I would like be a shaman for people, like I would heal people in my community. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like that was just an idea. And I guess that's like very modern medical based. You go to medical school, you get your degree and you're a doctor, and then you like go and get a job as a doctor. But yeah, it turned out that that's not really how it goes.
Right.
But that was enough to put me on the path of healing. And so about 3 years into my study, I was like organizing my notes and rewriting them into a new notebook, because they were kind of scattered around, like pieces here and there that weren't organized. And so I was like putting them into this like 5 subject notebook so that I could reference my own notes better when I wanted to, go further with my education. And I had recorded ceremonies with a mini disc recorder and transcribed the musical notes in musical notation, as well as the lyrics and translations. And I had video footage that I had shot in ceremony using infrared, and also like out of ceremony with preparations of medicines. And so I had this collection of material, and I just happened to just kind of step back and say, wow, I've got a lot of material. And what if someone had handed this to me when I arrived? Like, what if I got here and they're like, here you go, here's your book, your notebook full of all the information you'll need, and here's the recordings that you'll need to listen to, and here's the videos that you need to watch. Like, I would have been so far, I would have gotten so much further on that path than I was at that time. And that just instantly like gave me the light bulb to do that. Like, why? Well, I have all this material. Why don't I like give it to people that are interested in the same, following the same path as me? And so that gave birth to the idea of what would become the Ayahuasca Foundation, which was really like a source, an educational resource for people that felt called to the path to be able to study, and that I would like make that much more easy for them to navigate to get to that point. As for like how easy it is to navigate once they start, a lot of that's, you know, not teachable, but but at least providing the materials could accelerate the process.
I feel like I've heard this story of a Carlos training with a Don Juan and taking a bunch of notes somewhere before.
Yes, this is very true. I had some interesting experiences with Carlos Castaneda in ceremony, like about, you know, what I was going to do, which is funny because I haven't thought about that for a while, but I will be writing a series of books also.
Nice.
That will be like going the next level. At least that's what I told him at the time, how arrogant I was. Like, hey, Carlos, I'm going to write books that take it to the next level.
So can you share some more about what you do at the Ayahuasca Foundation? Where are you located, and what are your programs?
Right. Well, the seed that was planted by that experience or that realization or decision was what we call the initiation course. And so we have 2 locations. The Ayahuasca Foundation uses one location where Noya Rao trees grow, and that's a whole nother topic we can get into. But that location is basically like a mini Shipibo community. And that's where we hold the initiation course, which is an 8-week course that is a training program that focuses on plant dietas and ayahuasca ceremonies, leading ceremonies, working with the medicine in the ceremonies, opening and closing ceremonies, raising, lowering, and balancing energy in ceremonies. So those are like the main focuses, and the plant dietas obviously work very closely with that process as well, and the teaching of Iquitos, and the also like making of plant medicines and treatments. That course is very, very special to me. We've done now 42 courses. So we've had about 600 students, and some of those students now have churches and healing centers, depending on the legality of the countries that they are in. And then there's all these other practitioners that are, you know, not necessarily established, but are helping people, which is incredibly fulfilling. So that's a big part of the Ayahuasca Foundation. And really it was like a principal motivation to create the Ayahuasca Foundation. But apart from that, we have our research and retreat center called Riosbo. And there we hold retreats that are out from a 1 week to 4 weeks long. The 4-week program is also an educational course. So half of the course is like a plant dieta based, but we don't teach ayahuasca ceremony procedure. It's more like personal training to be your own healer. And the other half would be like a more typical like healing retreat where the plant medicines are given to you, but not necessarily in conjunction with education. Although we do include like educational elements in all of our programs. At that center also, we host research funded by the British Medical Research Council and led by a team of doctors from the National Health Services in the UK. And so that's really unique also. And now this year, you know, as most people that are watching this are probably aware, psychedelic therapy is exploding right now. And cities and states are decriminalizing, or if not legalizing, various forms of psychedelic therapies, which is fantastic. It's all seemingly happening quite fast. But it looks like because of the nature of what I just described, where we have already been doing educational courses for over a decade and also working with doctors to research the effects of psychedelic therapy, or specifically ayahuasca and plant medicine in the Shipibo tradition, it's almost like obvious that what we need to do is to create a course for therapists to be able to train in ancestral psychedelic therapy, which is a term I coined since the last time you and I spoke. But ancestral psychedelic therapy, I feel, is an important distinction. If you're going to be treated with medicines like iboga or peyote or ayahuasca, it's going to look very different than if you're working with MDMA or ketamine or even mushrooms. And that's because of that ancestral tradition, and that within that ancestral tradition is a very important distinction of paradigm, distinction of understanding the ideology and methodology of healing. And so I feel like it's an important distinction to make. And then it looks like we will be working to create an ancestral psychedelic therapy training program for therapists that feel like it's the path that they would like to take.
That's beautiful. Yeah, we really we feel the same way. As like there's a very big distinction between even having the same medicine in a clinical setting versus in a maloka. So I was curious if you could talk to us a little bit about like what are some of those distinctions, and how are like the traditions, practices, beliefs around this ancestral way of healing with these medicines. How could some of that could be ported over to Western medicine, and like what are some of those traditions and practices that have like efficacy on their own?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that is such an important point. It is everything in my world, because I feel like Western medicine is so material based and so like chemistry based, that it's missing so much of the healing process, which is consciousness. I'm amazed that consciousness is so lacking in our current, like here we are, it's 2021, and yet we're still like not aware of the power of consciousness in our medicine and in healing. It's surprising to me. And that's the core of the shamanic traditions. Like consciousness is at the core. Of course, they would say spirit, and I'm choosing to say consciousness just because I don't want to get into that unnecessary debate about spirit. But to talk about spirit, you can't talk about spirit and talk about medicine in the Western world, or even talk about science in the Western world. It's as if they're just incompatible concepts, which is terribly unfortunate. But consciousness doesn't have that, which is why I feel like it's a better term to use if we are trying to bridge those gaps between the paradigms, which I hope we can do. And so by putting consciousness at the forefront of the healing process, we have the opportunity to take advantage of something that everyone has, which is the most powerful tool that we have, and to optimize its ability within our own desire to heal. And that's what, to me, is shamanism. Shamanism is this incredibly well-developed science of optimizing consciousness in the healing process. And an easy example of that is that ayahuasca is always drunk in ceremony. You can't really take ceremony away from ayahuasca, or ayahuasca away from ceremony. Like if you're talking about ayahuasca, you are also talking about ayahuasca ceremonies. And it's something that like it's so inherent in my understanding that I would like not say ceremony. And then coming to the United States, I would have to like catch myself to make sure like, hey, I'm not just saying drink ayahuasca. Like when I say drink ayahuasca, obviously I'm saying drink ayahuasca in an ayahuasca ceremony, because it's so inherent. It's so like, you don't need to say ceremony. If you say I drank ayahuasca, you mean that you drank it in a ceremony. But unfortunately in Western medicine, because ceremony is not a part of that, and because it's almost a foreign term, you kind of need to like add that to make sure that people understand if you're describing drinking ayahuasca. But the ceremony is an incredibly important part, if not the most important part of the ayahuasca experience. And why is that? Well, right off the bat, like if you're going to go to a ceremony, any ceremony, you're going to go to a wedding ceremony, you're going to go to a funeral ceremony. Unfortunately, we don't have too many ceremonies in our life, but we do have some. The term ceremony automatically encourages a change in behavior. And it encourages a change in behavior towards a higher level of respect, a higher level of reverence. There is something sacred. These are all like concepts and behavioral changes that we automatically associate simply by thinking about ceremony. And those are all very, very positive consciousness changes. And so by having your medicine be served in a ceremony, automatically you are optimizing your consciousness simply by calling it a ceremony. Now, of course, it's not just called the ceremony. And to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of how the term ceremony has started to get thrown around, where someone will just be like, oh, I did an LSD ceremony yesterday. And you're like, what does that entail? I took LSD. And like, okay, let's not call it a ceremony. Let's not degrade the value of the term. Ayahuasca ceremonies are not just the name for how you describe when you take it. It's a incredibly intricate, complex system of rituals that are surrounded by and formed by methodologies and ideologies. And a big central theme of that is that nature will heal you, that the consciousness of nature is far beyond my puny consciousness. And that if I can connect with that consciousness, then I will gain a level of wisdom within me, even if I don't understand it, that will bring me to a much higher level of existence that will sort out my problems and allow me a greater ability to sort them out on a conscious level as well. And that you just don't see that in Western medicine. You just don't see the opportunity to have an aid in sorting out your problems. Most of the time it's that the medicine just does something for you and you don't contribute anything. And so there's some really powerful distinctions. And to me, the ceremony could be an easy addition to Western medicine. Surgeries could be surgical ceremonies. Chemotherapy could be chemotherapy ceremonies. A number of treatments could be framed in the form of ceremony that would automatically bring benefit to them. And then the development of those rituals and practices that further enhance the consciousness could further optimize the outcomes of those processes. I think that would be a great step forward, especially with chemotherapy. I think that would be like the perfect place to start. But if you've ever drank ayahuasca, which I know you guys have, like one key part of the ritual and the methodology and ideology is that you are connecting with a conscious spirit. You're connecting with a conscious being by drinking the ayahuasca. That's within the ideology. And the methodology is that when you take the cup, that you state your intention as you are speaking to the conscious being of the medicine. And within the natural form of this being is this immense gratitude and respect, and this understanding that this is far superior than me because it's recognized to be a consciousness that has been around for much longer than us. As we know, biologically, that plants are obviously billions of years older than humans, and that it's also a part of a connection to the greater whole of the earth, which is a conscious being in the ideology of it. But stating your intention just on a consciousness level, you're putting your reasons for taking the medicine at the forefront of your consciousness, and that becomes your guiding light, your compass, to help you navigate through the process so that you're constantly working towards your goal. We don't have that in Western medicine. And in fact, we end up oftentimes with the opposite of it, where someone is taking a pill and they need to take that pill. Maybe they need to take it once a day. So every morning they need to take their pill. And when they open the pill bottle, they are already thinking how much they hate that pill. And when they're taking the pill, if they're thinking about it at all, they're probably thinking something negative about the pill. And what they're putting into the the forefront of their consciousness, if anything at all, because oftentimes you're just taking the pill, watching a YouTube video, ready to go, like you're not thinking, there's no consciousness at all. It's just the pill comes in and then whatever. So there's no communication that would enhance even your own reaction and response to let your body know, like, hey, I'm taking a medicine. This is the purpose for me taking this medicine. This is what it's supposed to achieve on a cellular level. Your cells might gain an advantage. Okay, this is what this pill is supposed to be doing. Let's try to make that happen. We don't have any of that. We just take the pill. And oftentimes we're taking the pill in a negative mindset where we literally don't want to take the pill, yet we also want it to heal us, which is a bizarre concept. It's literally like if you feel like you need help and you call the person you hate to get it. It's such a weird idea, but that's where we are. And so, I adopting these concepts that are in the shamanic paradigm, or what I call the ancestral paradigm, because they're all from our own ancestry, regardless of who we are. They all believed a very similar paradigm. Then we could make medicine work better. And you don't have to get FDA approval. You don't have to do a bunch of clinical trials. It's so simple. It's so easy to include consciousness in the healing process. And it can be done at a grassroots level, of course. But if we just put pages into the books that are taught in medical schools, all of the doctors would be able to take advantage of those skills and those methodologies and ideas and concepts that are already a big part of the ancestral traditions, and they would just have a better outcome. It's a guarantee.
So many points that you made are so aligned with how we think about integration, and how we believe that preparation and intention and all of these things that you were speaking about are part of the integration process. And I was wondering what your thoughts are about integration as far as the psychedelic experience, and like, how do you think about it, and how do you teach it, I guess?
Yeah, I think that my ideas have probably changed since the last time we spoke on that as well. I focus a lot on memory now. I'm always in full development mode and learning and trying to figure out better ways to articulate or explain things to people because of the nature of my job, and also for my own personal interest and passion. But something that I've been trying to make really, really concise is, to me, I mean, I'm biased because I made this up, but the key is, how you respond. So it's not what happens to you, but how you respond to what happens to you. And how you respond to what happens to you determines how you interpret that experience. And how you interpret the experience ultimately determines how you remember it. And your memory of your experiences is what we call reality. And so when we think about our reality, what we're really doing is accessing our memories. And the way that we put them together, or the way that we connect the dots of our memories, is the meaning that we attribute to reality or to our lives. And so there's some real power in that. On a consciousness level, there's actually quite a bit of room to make significant changes, because the way that we respond isn't the truth. We make it the truth in our interpretation, and then ultimately in our memory. And so to me, integration is a process of changing our memories to be more beneficial to us, and also more accurate with what actually resonates with us. And we can do that because the recognition of what happened to us is secondary to the recognition of how we remember what happened to us. And so to me, integration is about building up more and more memories that work for your benefit, to eventually override, to exceed the balance and go into the benefit, so that you have more and more memories that are beneficial, and then by ratio, fewer and fewer memories that are detrimental. And so the integration process for me is, when you have a profound experience, oftentimes in the beginning, that profound experience is a small set of memories. Even though the potential for those memories is tremendous, without attention, we will perhaps suffice with a small set of memories. And unfortunately, those small set of memories could fade away. So to me, integration is really the practice of not only maintaining the memories that we have of the transformation, of the healing process, but increasing those memories by giving more detail to them. And so to me, like one of the most powerful practices that you can have is to create a work of art based on your healing process. And it's something that you constantly go back to and that you make better and better. And the way that you make it better and better is by adding more and more detail to it. And the more and more detail, every detail is a memory. And so every detail that you add to it, you're basically building up a collection of memories that work for your benefit. And so when you get to this point where you have something that the goal to me as a motivation to do it is that one day you're going to help the world with your work, with whatever work of art that you create is going to make the world a better place. So if that's a literary work, then you're going to share it with people that suffered from the same problems that you did so that they can achieve a healing and understanding the way that you were lucky enough to do. And if it's a work of art in music, then same idea, like you're going to be able to share that music with people that when they listen to it, they will have an improvement in their lives. And if it's a painting or whatever, however it moves you to create that work based on your experiences, by adding more and more details that are ultimately memories, and not just adding, but like perfecting, improving the articulation or expression of that memory, getting it like better and better so that when it is expressed, it has more power to it. That to me is like the integration process in a nutshell.
Such a beautiful way to speak about it. I really like that. I like to talk about like fine tuning your alignment. It's kind of similar, like I always use this symbol with my hand of like where you know that you're going from your heart, and looking back on where you've been and understanding that was the right way to go, and kind of adjusting, your behavior when you are stepping out of line with yourself, that keeps you centered. And I think working with plant medicine gives you it gives you a touchstone to your own center. And I like the bringing in the memory with it. That's a really cool way to think about it. I'm so glad that we are talking to you again, because you have so many new cool ideas to share today.
Well, the artwork, the work of art rather, to me is like a way to bring the energy to your heart, because we're if you just try to integrate in your head, it's going to be much more challenging. It really has to come from the heart, or by bringing it into the heart, you're going to have much better effect. And to me, like that's what art does. Like we know when we are making a work of art, then we put our emotions into it. But like you said, also like, certainly like understanding that it's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it. It's such a powerful way to live your life, so then you can then kind of retroactively go back, that kind of the way that you just did at the beginning of this conversation, John, when you were like, how great is it that opiates like bring us so quickly to the point of realization,
Thank God.
Like you managed to take something that at the time, or at some point in the past, was probably like your worst enemy.
For sure.
And now you retroactively go back and remember it as a important tool that helped to accelerate your transformation. What happened is exactly the same. You're not like playing a game with what happened. You're playing a smarter interpretation of what happened, because the way that you were interpreting it before was detrimental to your well-being. You can reinterpret it in a way that would be beneficial to your well-being. And isn't that going to produce better results as you move forward in your life? And that to me is like, you know, a huge part of the healing process, but also an important part of the integration, because we're always going to like be encountering more and more shit, you know, like triggers that could make us think that we're going backwards. You know, we could respond in a negative way, or we can hopefully remind ourselves that how we respond is our true responsibility. And by taking the power of our ability to respond, or our responsibility, we can then dictate how we remember those experiences, which ultimately will be the reality that we live in.
Yeah, it's like moving from being a chess piece on the board to the player moving the pieces and responding to what happens. Something we've been talking about a lot recently is like this question to ask of like, how is this exactly what I need right now? And we've been finding it like easier when we're looking back to say like, okay, I can see how this is exactly what I needed then. This was exactly what I needed then. And so on and so forth, back all the way to, wow, all of this helped me grow into who I am today. And I got all these beautiful lessons out of this experience, and et cetera, et cetera. And looking back and seeing that is the case, that whatever did show up in my life was for my benefit and was exactly what I needed, gives me more confidence when I can't answer the question currently. I'm like, well, how is this exactly what I need? This kind of sucks right now. And it's like, oh, well, you know, I might not know why this is exactly what I need right now just yet, but I got a whole bunch of evidence behind me that shows me at some point I will see that that's true right now also. And yeah, we've been vibing on that pretty hard recently, and it's allowed us to like take a chill pill and relax and like go with the flow. And yeah, that makes the life experience just so much more pleasant.
Totally. No, it's a well put. I describe it as like, well, just project into the future. Obviously, you're going to look back at the shit you're going through right now and be thankful for it, because you'll have actually been able to see how it all played out for your benefit, and because we've all had it in the past. And that's a great lesson to give and to remember yourself. Of course, it's a lot easier to just say that than it is
for sure.
Well, so we have a course where we are like trying to make a bridge between, you know, the retreat experience and the ceremonies and all of the magic that happens in that setting, and getting ready for that, and also keeping that alive after it's over. And a lot of people come to us and they're kind of like, I guess my question is, how can you help? So an example being like being grateful for an addiction. When I tell people that I'm grateful for my addiction, sometimes they're like, you are completely full of shit. Like they don't, how do you get people who are skeptical or who are wanting to work with psychedelics, but are like afraid of or disbelieving in certain aspects of it? How do you kind of share that magic piece with them, I guess, in advance of them having done it? You know, like, I don't know if that's a good question. But
well, I think that, you know, I guess maybe two parts to it. One is that giving an example that is a story, because when you say it as a concept, that's not very heart-centered, you know. Right. And that, I think, is why people think about what you're saying and it doesn't make sense because it's not logical. But when you tell it as a story, then, you know, like if you turn it into that art form, then you actually are able to touch someone on an emotional level. And so, like, I have a great story that I refer to a lot, which is my first trip to Peru when I went to Cusco. to as a tourist, but I was on a super tight budget. And so I took a bus from Lima to Cusco, and I was by myself, and I didn't speak Spanish. And I thought, I was so nervous about traveling by myself in my first time in South America that I thought it would be a good idea to leave my passport with the family that I had been staying with in Lima. And so, because I was worried that I might get robbed. And so I didn't have my identification on me. And I was on a bus that crashed head on into a Mack truck on, high up in the Andes, like in the snow.
Holy shit.
And I was wearing a t-shirt and shorts, and all my stuff was like in my suitcase, or in my backpack rather, that was on the roof of the bus. And yeah, we crashed up on the top of the Andes Mountains. And now I was like, oh my God, like, this is not good.
Yeah.
This is like really bad. Some people were hurt, and now we're like on the side of the road, just a collection of people. What the hell do we do now? The bus was smashed, and we're screwed. And now I'm freezing, and I don't even have any ID. Like, what if I had been killed? No one would even know who I was. Like, I was like spinning out like how bad a situation this was. But someone saw me shivering and came over and gave me a hooded sweatshirt. And it turned out to be a young guy from Amsterdam who was also traveling by himself. And then that led to me meeting another guy from France who was traveling by himself, and another guy from Scotland who was traveling by himself. We were the 4 gringos on the bus, and we all spoke English, and a couple of them spoke Spanish. And we hung out on the side of the road for like 6 hours. Eventually they did fix the bus and we got into Cusco. But by then we had been hanging out for hours together. So we joined forces. We like decided that we would just share hotel rooms together. And then we were all going to hike Machu Picchu, like do the Inca Trail. So we all did that together. So we were able to share our expenses. And I had not calculated correctly. So I wouldn't have been able to go if I didn't have the opportunity to share those expenses. And so like crashing the bus made it possible for me to actually do the Inca Trail and visit Machu Picchu. Like, my budget was so low that at the end, coming back, I was allowed to sleep on the floor of their hotel room by the hotel manager and not pay. But clearly that wouldn't have worked if I didn't have a room, if they didn't have the room. So like all of these details worked out because we crashed. And I'm like forever thankful that that bus driver was so stupid to pass someone in the opposite lane going around a curve where we couldn't see and hit
South
that
American
Mack truck. Yeah, like I'm so glad that we hit the Mack truck head on. And that to me is like a better way of getting someone like to feel what's happening, so to tell your stories, in a way that allows their emotions to get involved. And then it's the same idea, it's the same concept, but it's not so logical and it's much more like emotional. That would be like my best bet. And I tell that story like all the time.
It's a great story.
But usually when you use a story, especially if it's a story about yourself, then it's almost like you can't avoid, if you're listening to someone tell a story, you're automatically like searching your own memories for a similar type of story. It's just like whenever that happens, someone could be like talking about a flight they were on where someone was being really annoyed or something annoying. And you're like, oh dude, I was on a flight, like it just happens, and you can use that as like a really great advantage as a way to speak to someone about something that you would like to say to them, but instead you tell them a story about yourself. And then they inherently like jump in with their own story. And there's no like I need to judge that based on, there's no like take defense. I'm not going to like get defensive because you're just telling a story about yourself. But I'm now like open to thinking about it and how it applies to my own life.
Well, it creates vulnerability. It's like you're sharing this difficult or surprising thing that happened to you. And I mean, vulnerability fosters connection. And even when people don't like it, a lot of people are afraid of vulnerability because they don't want to be seen as being weak or whatever thing, but it's actually the way that you make connection with other people. And so I love the storytelling aspect. I'm so glad that we lost your previous podcast so that we got to talk to you again today. That's such a beautiful story.
Yeah, that what you were just talking about is really like how I got clean. Is, I went to 12-step meetings, and I was really fortunate that the group I was with was very, very much on that tip of like, we share our experience and like, that is it. There's no advice here. There's no suggestions. And so I would call someone freaking, I'm like, I'm dealing with this and blah, blah, blah. And then it's always like, well, this is what happened to me in my most similar situation. And I did this and this is what, and yeah, I made it through like the first half of my 20s by just this principle of hearing other people's experiences and picking and choosing. Well, man, that what they did there really worked out for them. Maybe I'll try some of that myself, or like, right. I really like that perspective that they learned from that. Like, how can I adopt that? Kind of switching gears. I'm really curious. You got really excited talking about Noya Rao. So I was curious, like, what did you want to share about that beautiful tree?
Well, I mean, it's amazing when we first built that center, the Inkan medicine school. Noya Rao was like a secret. Like we weren't allowed, or we were highly advised not to talk about it and not to take pictures of it. And, like it was like totally a secret. And now it's not a secret. Now, like it's become pretty well known, but it is so fascinating. It really still is just a part of like 2 familial lineages within the Shipibo tribe that even know what Noya Rao is. And maybe like even within that family, half a dozen, maybe 10 people have seen in the tree out of those 2 families. Like, even though they've worked with the tree, a lot of it was like not in the presence of the tree. And so it's just been, I mean, it's kind of mind boggling, it's like one of the most fascinating stories I think that there can be. I have my own like personal theories about it, but it's like introduced a whole concept that was very novel and still is, which is that trees can become enlightened too. And that trees have like a state of consciousness the same way that we do, and that we recognize certain human beings for being enlightened, and trees can attain that as well. And my personal theory has to do with, because there's folklore about Noya Rao, but it's kind of like mythology almost. And that mythology was that there were Noya Rao trees all over the place, but then they went extinct. And what does that mean? What happened there? And we almost kind of have a similar idea. I mean, we don't necessarily say that there were enlightened beings all over the place, but we do kind of have this feeling that there was a higher sense of consciousness in more ancestral times. And I think that's like a similar notion. And so for me, there was like a key point that might be a way of understanding why they went extinct, which is that the Spanish came and invaded the country, and they brought with them like a a really low level consciousness, a consciousness that did not respect nature, that did not respect indigenous wisdom, that was very conquering, it was very like greed based. It was like low consciousness level. And so it acted as like an infection that prevented the same level of consciousness to be maintained. And so the enlightened trees couldn't maintain their enlightenment, or humans couldn't see what trees were enlightened because their own consciousness had been lowered. And so then fast forward to more recent times, we now find that idea of a conquistador, of a conqueror, is not common anymore. In fact, the people that are going to the Amazon rainforest are pretty much the opposite. They have a tremendous respect for nature. They want to preserve the Amazon rainforest. They have a tremendous respect for indigenous wisdom. They want to preserve indigenous wisdom. They want to learn from it. They view themselves as primitive in comparison. And so pretty much like the entire opposite of like the conqueror mentality. And for that reason, there has been this uplifting of consciousness in the rainforest that has allowed trees to become to reach attainment, or to have humans that have the perceptive ability to see the trees that have attained enlightenment. I'm open to both theories, but more importantly, like our school, to me, because we have been teaching the Shipibo tradition and the ancestral paradigm to people from all over the world, we've been helping people to raise their consciousness enough to become aware of these trees and to have that awareness within ourselves just to find those trees in the first place, but also perhaps to facilitate the trees themselves becoming enlightened. Because when we first found a tree, and I should say it wasn't we, it was my teacher, Don Enrique Lopez, who was dieting the tree using a pipe made from the tree, having never seen the tree actually. But then in his visions did see the tree, and then was able to find it in physical form, and then buy that piece of land. And then we built that center, and then we started offering those diets to people from all over the world. And then we found another tree, and then another tree, and then another tree. And then Don Enrique's brothers came and started helping him with the center. I employed them at our other centers, and they bought their own pieces of land, and then they found trees on their land, because they had been doing Noyara dietas. And so when they bought the land, they didn't have a Noyara tree, or at least they didn't think they had a Noyara tree. But then when they built their own houses, they began to have ceremonies there, and then they realized that they did have Noyara trees, or those Noyara trees appeared.
Yeah.
And that's part of the mythology. In fact, the term Noyarao means flying tree or flying medicine. And that's part of the myth, is that the trees can fly. And there's like stories about how the tree like would lift up and float to a new place. And how do I make sense of that, and understanding that these are stories that have been passed on. But if a tree is attaining enlightenment, meaning if you've maybe lived in an area for 40 years and then all of a sudden a tree with glowing leaves, like the Noyara tree has leaves that are bioluminescent, like you'd be like, where the hell did that tree come from?
Yeah.
Now you could think, oh, it became enlightened, or you could think it must have flown in. It must have like flown in. That's my interpretation of how that came to be, as to why they call it the flying tree. But it's all very, very fascinating. I mean, I don't have the answers. I've got theories, but I have done dietas with Noyarao that have been unbelievably profound. And it's hard for me to describe it without using the term enlightenment. The message of Noyarao is to have your own light from within shine. She's constantly like taking lights and putting them inside of you. It's like she wants you to recognize that you have light within you. And I don't know a better word to describe that than enlightenment.
Wow, beautiful.
I don't know if there's anything we could follow with that. That was I want to come see these trees now.
Yeah. I like the flying tree paradigm is like, in my mind, totally plausible and possible. It's like, since I've been working with the plants, is the things that I thought were not real or not possible, that like number has just been steadily decreasing the whole time. So yeah,
magic is real, and it's right in front of you everywhere.
I got a message on Facebook from someone that was a botanist at Kew Gardens, and they apparently had just like talked to a friend of theirs who had done a dieta with Noyarao, and they were wondering like why there isn't any information about it, like what is the species of it. And I wrote back and I said, I'm not sure if there is a species. I think that like an enlightened being in human form, it may be a tree becomes enlightened, and thus the term Noyarao refers to its state of consciousness rather than like a species. And that elicited this bizarre response, which I understand. She was like, so my friend just did a dieta, like what did she really diet? And I was like, she dieted Noyarao. Right. Yeah, like what do you mean really? And she's like, no, but what is the tree actually? And I was like, it's actually Noyarao. Like what is your term? Like it does it require a Latin name to be actual?
That's what happens where, like you were saying earlier about everything being so chemical and like scientific and in the mind, it's you have to start moving from this, okay, we have this realm that we know is true. One of the things that medicine helps us do is it pulls the threads apart of things that we know are true. And it asks you, how do you know this? When did you make this agreement? And maybe the thing that you think is true is not actually how the whole story. And I love that about it, but it's something I think difficult at first too, to let go of those, because it becomes part of your identity, especially if you're a scientist or a botanist or someone who, works in these man-made structures.
It's a safety net. It like gives us a security in this constantly changing and like impermanent world of like, well, at least I know these things are true.
I hear the term trust the science all the time, and that makes me laugh a little bit, because it's like science is what we know to this point, maybe. Like it's theories, it's based on what we are able to understand with our current ability, and it's often wrong. We often find out, we couldn't understand the full story before. So trust the science, yes, and trust the heart, trust the spirit, and trust that. I love the idea of the earth being a consciousness, this like ancient consciousness that is far superior to ours, that has all the answers, and that can really heal us. So yeah, more good stories.
No, for real. that whole concept, like really, it plays so much into ayahuasca, because it's something that I'm sure you've dealt with, and we all maybe have even asked it ourselves, but like, what really happened? Like what I thought that I had like this vision that this was happening, but what really happened? Like there's this, we're tied to this idea that there is a really, that there isn't actually, and I was speaking to someone when I was in Peru, she had drank ayahuasca one time. She was Peruvian, and she had an experience with Jesus Christ, and she told me that she had that experience, but that the people that were in her church said that, who clearly like don't agree with drinking ayahuasca, I'm guessing based on what they said, that was the devil, like that pretending to be Jesus. And that was what that really was,
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her, well, I don't know if anyone will ever know what really is, but what happened as a result of it? Like, did you feel like your life improved after the ceremony where you had this interaction with Jesus Christ? And she was like, oh my gosh, yes, so much, And I'm like, well, that's what really happened.
Uh-huh.
Like whether or not it was, I mean, even if it was the devil pretending to be Jesus, then fuck.
Right.
Let's have that,
Right.
like forget about what really happened and just look at the way you responded to it and the results, And that's always what I'm saying, like in my own healing story.
Mm-hmm.
And even I just said it even in part of the story now, it's just like, I don't really know what happened,
Mm-hmm.
I just know that I never did heroin again.
Uh-huh.
And so brilliant, like
Exactly.
isn't that what's most important? And I think that if we get caught up in chemistry, because I find it comical, to be honest, that chemistry does not satisfy me at all.
No.
Like saying that there's an MAO inhibitor that potentiates dimethyltryptamine does not satisfy me at all. So I MAOI and DMT, and then I have a spirit come to me and fix me. Clearly chemical chemistry, right? Like there's some key details that haven't been connected.
Right.
Just saying DMT and then spiritual experience, there's like a lot that I'm not connecting in there. And I don't think any chemist can connect it.
No.
And also, like, how sad would it be if you're like looking at love as a level, a measurement of oxytocin or something, like you're like, well, I felt a large amount of oxytocin in the presence of that person.
Right. Well, it's also like even if some of these chemical reactions are this objective reality that is happening, and even if that was the whole picture, we still experience that objective reality subjectively. And that subjective experience is really, really what matters. It's what, like you were saying, what the meaning we get out of it and what direction we choose to take our lives, having had this experience and associated whatever meaning with it. And what we do with that is what matters to me.
Right. I mean, we all get the freedom and the power to choose our interpretation. And it just seems foolish for us to allow that interpretation power to go to waste, to just like let someone else dictate it for us. Like, I'm going to take that power. I'm going to make the most I can of it so that the results of it are the most fulfilling for me.
That's right.
And it's not a game. I'm not pretending.
Right.
I'm interpreting. That's like what we're always doing. It's just that you can empower yourself to be the interpreter, or you can go along with someone else's interpretation that has no idea who you are.
Right. Yeah, I think that was like my big draw to plant medicine was, like growing up in our societies, you sit down, you do what you're told, you regurgitate the information to you given in a book, and we don't care if you feel this way about it or you want to write this way. This is the way you do everything. And we got an answer for you. And it was always someone else's plan. And when I met the plants are like, what is your plan? What do you want to do? You have the freedom and the power to create whatever. So think about it and bring it into reality. And that, like, I don't know, I love calling them teachers, because in my mind now, that's like what a real teacher should be doing, is empowering the student to set their own course and have the tools necessary to chart it and see it through to destination.
We have sensory perception. I'm pretty sure that no one denies that. You know, it's pretty much like well established and agreed upon by everyone that we have sensory perception. We have senses. Typically, we unfortunately only call the 5 senses that have names, but clearly we have more than that. You know, clearly there are more senses, and we have these kind of cryptic phrases that still linger from when we did recognize those senses. It's very common for someone to describe a gut feeling that they have, but yet we don't recognize the gut as a sense organ for some reason, or we don't recognize the organs that are in our gut to provide sensory input when clearly they do. You know, we say that you're heartbroken, but yet for some reason we don't consider the heart to be a sense organ when clearly it is. And so I think that we're like totally handicapping ourselves, and science is to blame for that, because why the fuck haven't you figured out that we have more sense organs and that we should be acknowledging them, and by doing so increasing our awareness of the information they're providing us, so that we have a greater set of information to navigate the world from. But at least if we can do it on our own, then we can like open the doors for more information, because there's a concept that is also very well established and very well agreed upon, which is instinct. But yet humans don't have it. You know, like everyone else has it. All the animals, like you're like, hey, how did the animal know to eat that grass when it got sick? And like instinct. But humans, because maybe we're not listening to the senses that we have that are actually providing important information, and we're like too caught in the logical aspects of mind instead of our true sensory information, we're keeping ourselves away from the instincts that are connecting us to that greater consciousness, that greater wisdom of a being that we're a part of. And that's all ancestral paradigm. That's all the way that we thought for 100,000 years. And it's really like science, and I get it. You know, I understand why the scientific revolution took place, and I agree with it. But it's time for us to take science to the ultimate level, which is it's intended to, and not just stay in the stagnant pool that it's kind of become, where you can't question anything. And if you have a new thought that goes against what's already been said, then you throw it out, which is so anti-science. So I'm a huge fan of science, but I also think that plant medicine is a true science.
I hope that true science includes more than we can just dissect and analyze and measure with our hands. I always find it real funny that people like Isaac Newton was for sure an esotericist, and then like one of the people gets credited with like being the one of the fathers of modern science, Rene Descartes, is like an angel came and told him like what direction to go with the science. So it's like this has like mystic origins to begin with. Right.
And those stories are probably more common than not.
For sure.
Like, and even in religion, we kind of do the same game. You know, like the people that are saints or the people that are written about in the Bible, almost all of them have had some angel come down and tell them something, you know, like talk directly to them. But yet now, like if you're like, an angel came down, they're like, oh, dude, you need to see a doctor. You're like,
right.
What? Like, aren't you like, isn't this whole thing based on those guys? Like,
right.
Or they say, no, that was the devil.
Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
If anyone comes to visit you, it was the devil. It could not have possibly been anyone other than the devil.
I had the same interaction myself. I was at the Green Go bar. I don't know if you've been to Iquitos, but unfortunately it's not there anymore. But I was just like minding my own business, having a smoothie, and two young guys were also there, and they were talking, and they were talking about mosquitoes and mosquito bites. And I don't know how, I don't even remember, did I interact or they interact, but somehow we started talking together about what to do about mosquitoes. And that led to what they were doing. They were missionaries, and which is common in Iquitos. And one of them was a pretty young guy. He was like 22 years old. And he told me his story of like how he came to God, or how he came to Jesus more specifically. And it was an awesome story. You know, it was, would I like tell the same story? Probably not. Like I could have like whatever analyzed it, but the result was clear. His life had gotten way better.
Nice.
And you could see it. You could feel it when he was talking. Like he was in a bad way, and he found Jesus, and now he's in a better way. And who's going to knock that? I certainly wouldn't knock that. I don't care what really happened. Like it's the result. Well, I had a Jesus Christ experience as well with ayahuasca. And so he had just like opened up to me and told me his story. So I decided to tell him my story, and he was super receptive. But the other guy was older. He was like 28, not much older. And he decided to interpret my experience for me. So nice of him. And he said that was the devil. Mm-hmm. And I was like, fuck you, dude. Like, this guy gets to tell his Jesus Christ story, and that's like great, and be a missionary because of it. But my Jesus Christ story, and I'm like I'm getting tricked by the devil? Like, what the fuck, man? That's like such a dick thing to do.
It's really confusing because like when you're taking a sacred plant, it seems like they would be on board with that, with like whatever you're getting visions from something that came from the earth. Like it's a natural, they're here to help us. But a lot of the kind of religious dogma doesn't align with.
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up, right? Because that became part of my argument. I was like, dude, Jesus was a plant doctor.
For sure.
He used plants. And he was like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, the anointing oil. He used an oil that was based on olive oil that had 4 other plants in it that were all medicinal plants. And this guy who was a missionary, he was like, the anointing oil is just metaphorical. I'm like, no, it is not, dude. The Bible. And then luckily I I almost remembered it, but I was like, dude, it's the book of Exodus. It's like book 32 or something like that. And so he had it on his phone, like a Bible. And
they have a phone Bible now?
Oh, for sure.
Course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. And there's probably like 20 competing apps for it. Right? But he looked it up and he found it. And then it was actually kind of a happy story. Ending to the story was happy because he was like, wow, like I never knew that. And I was like, yeah, dude, man, it's like there's the recipe for the anointing oil. Like it's not a metaphor, man. Mm-hmm. He made this oil with medicinal plants and he bathed people in it. That's a plant bath. We do that all the time, man. Like that's a big part of our treatment is to bathe people in plant essences. Mm-hmm. And that's what he did.
I love, I love the consciousness and the spirit of these plants is like, so we've watched so many people come with all these different practices where maybe the people that they were practicing with, whether it's like yoga or religion or some meditation group or whatever, were like, don't with the ayahuasca, like be careful about that. And they're coming, hearing all that. And then they come to ayahuasca and they're like, well, what about this group? And ayahuasca's always like, you like the group? Like, keep going to the group. I was like, you like church? Go to church. Yes, good. You like this? Go, like, whatever's working for you, do it.
And that to me is a good example of the type of wisdom that these plants have.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like if you have a child, you understand it, you just want the best outcome. And you want your child to like have their own passions and their own explorations, even if you have no idea what it is. And you like support the endeavor because you recognize what gives the best outcome. And you get concerned when the outcome isn't good. And that's when you like feel like a change should happen. But if the outcome is good, then just keep doing what you're doing.
Well, we hope you keep doing what you're doing because it's great. Do you have anything else you want to share with us today before we wrap up?
Oh, I don't know. I have been talking to some people from PBS, and they might be doing a show on psychedelic therapy.
Cool.
That would be so awesome.
Yeah, so there could actually be this really hopefully well done show that can bring like a much wider audience into an understanding of how consciousness plays an important role in the healing process. So I'll definitely be promoting that.
Nice.
Let us know. We're happy to share that as well.
Yeah, awesome.
It's so cool when like we always tell this story of her mom was like, I saw Anderson Cooper talking about PTSD and mushrooms. Like, that's like what y'all do. And we're like,
yeah,
it makes it real to someone who needs PBS or Anderson Cooper or whatever. So nice. That's awesome.
Yeah,
when people ask us about like we get a lot of questions like my mom is interested in microdosing, like where should she start? And I always tell them to read Michael Pollan's book, because he is like, people trust him as far as the general kind of your mom. It's like, this is a great book for moms to start reading about psychedelics and seeing, like, this is a guy who writes about food, who has, you've probably read some of his other books, and it gives it a little more, I guess, weight.
Yeah, like cred.
Yeah, it's like normal. You guys aren't just like super freaky hippies. It's
right. Also
Anderson Cooper and Michael Pollan are talking about this stuff. So PBS is a really big win, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Another cool piece of news since we spoke, the town that I used to live in when I went to UMass, Northampton, they decriminalized all plant medicines.
Nice.
So they're the third town in Massachusetts to now do that, which makes Massachusetts have the most towns that have decriminalized plant medicines. Of course, Oregon is still like paving the way because they did it statewide, but Massachusetts will vote this year to do it statewide as well.
Wow, beautiful.
That's amazing. We live in Texas, and
Texas has another one coming up to vote.
Yeah, they also have sort of secret medicinal marijuana here. It's like very little known, but you can get medicinal marijuana here for certain conditions.
They have a lot of like, there's also like a high number of like churches serving ayahuasca that seem to be doing it just fine for the past 6 years or so. So
I know of one church that was a student of our course.
Nice.
In Texas. Yeah.
Cool. We're excited. We're about to relocate to Austin. I lived there for about 17 years, and it's a really exciting place to be, I think, for kind of being part of the decriminalization movement and helping, being in a bigger city where we can have more of a community around us. So we're looking forward to that.
I have one of my best friends lives in Austin. He owns a restaurant called Fresco.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Sweet.
Yeah.
He came down and he drank ayahuasca
Nice.
back in 2007.
Beautiful.
I love it just is like spreading. It's so great.
Cool, brother. Well, it was good to talk to you again. We'll be in touch, and we'll let you know when we're gonna
We will not lose this one.
Hard copies.
I'm actually really grateful that we got to have another conversation with you, and just want to send good wishes for your future program for the psychedelic therapy training. I think that's really powerful and important, and good luck with the PBS thing. And yeah,
we'll be in touch.
All right.
Sounds good. Anytime you want to ever talk with us again, let us know. We're happy to have you on anytime.
All right, cool. Will do.
All right. Well, have a good day, Carlos. Bye.
Okay.
Later.
Take care.